Thanks for tuning in to the Product-Led Festival. We really hope you're enjoying the summit so far, because we've got even more insights heading your way. All sessions are designed to be interactive and give you the chance to engage with our panelists, so come ready to get involved with your questions and comments. For all things PLG, don't forget to check on the PLA memberships at productledalliance.com. Sit back and enjoy the next session. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Product-Led Festival. I'm really pleased to announce our next speakers for today. We've got Carmen Dicuto and Andrea Wang from Amplitude. Hi Andrea, I think we are still waiting on Carmen. But welcome to the festival and thank you so much for coming to talk with us today.
Hi, Kaylin, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
I'll just check where Andrea is for 1 second. Carmen, sorry. Everyone would like to let us know where they're tuning in from. I'm not sure where Carmen is. Would you, oh, here she is. Just wait for her to log on. Hi, Carmen. Are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great. Thank you for joining us on today's session. I will hand over to you guys to start your presentation.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session on defining your North Star. I am Andrea from Amplitude. Oops. Carmen, are you driving the slides?
You can go ahead and drive since we can go through it.
Okay, awesome. And I'm the product lead for the growth pillar at Amplitude. And during the last 2 years at Amplitude, have worked across a wide range of growth problems, including acquisition, activation, monetization. And on a day-to-day basis, I work really closely with my colleague, Carmen. And Carmen, will let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Carmen Dicuto. I also work on growth for Amplitude, particularly for our product analytics solution. I have a wide range of experience from sales-led, marketing-led, and product-led growth motions. And so I'm really excited to be here and share about product-led growth in particular. So most of you are probably familiar with Amplitude already. You've either heard of us or you've used us, and you probably are thinking about us in terms of, like I mentioned before, a product analytics solution. And that's been true up until earlier this year, and we've since grown into a full digital optimization system. So our goal is to really help organizations understand and build better digital products that's going to drive growth for their business. And so we've put together this unified system where you can have your data, analytics, and personalization for every team to utilize and move forward in one direction together with common visibility. And as you can see, we'll do that by delivering this series of interconnected solutions. We still have our Amplitude Analytics, which we're extremely well known for. And in this past year, we've added on experimentation, recommendation, and data management solutions as well. But that is not what we came here to really talk about today. That's just a little bit more about us. Today, we're actually going to be focusing on specifically the product North Star. And so we're going to get started on this topic by really talking about the product games, or the types of ways you can think about your product and how you can measure success. We'll then dig into what the product North Star is, and we're actually going to put it into practice and walk you through an exercise of how to think about creating your own North Star. And then we'll wrap up at the end of today's session with a Q&A. And I'll hand it back off to my colleague, Andrea.
Awesome. Thanks, Carmen. So the North Star metric is a topic that Amplitude has published an entire playbook around, which, by the way, I highly recommend you checking it out if you're interested in learning more. And we've also hosted thousands of workshops with product teams around the world across different industries on this exact topic. And the starting point of helping companies arrive at their North Star metric is really around thinking about what game are you playing. It's about establishing a really solid understanding of your business and what is at the core what your product is trying to do. So after looking at many different types of companies, we found that there are typically 3 games that companies typically play. And they are the game of attention, the game of transaction, and game of productivity. So let's dive into each to give some examples of which companies fall under each category and what are some typical product North Stars that you would see. So let's start with the game of attention. Think about Facebook or Netflix. These types of social media or media companies want you to spend more time on their platform. And that is probably the best indicator that you as a user is getting value from their products. So for companies like them, some of the common product North Stars that we see are total time spent engaging with content, users spending more than a certain amount of time per day, number of stories viewed, as well as if you're a subscription-based business, measuring how much time people are subscribing and streaming content on your platform. And one pitfall that we see with companies in this category is sometimes defining overly generic metrics that are not honing in on 1 or 2 critical actions that users perform in your product that are truly capturing whether they're getting value. And one really common metric that we see across companies is daily active users, for example. Many companies simply measure active as logging into the product, while not measuring if these users are doing certain critical actions that are most indicative of them getting value. So this is one call out that while it might be common to see companies defining metrics around DAU, MAU, it is really important to think about what are some critical actions that are really correlated with long-term retention, and what is your unique product strategy, and what are some features that you want them to do every single time they log into the product, not just performing any sort of action. So this is the first game of attention. Now let's move on to the second game of transaction. Typically, you would see retail and e-commerce companies play in this game. And some typical North Stars are total number of purchases completed, average number of purchases per subscriber, number of searches completed, and number of seats upgrades purchased. And this is pretty straightforward. If you're an e-commerce company, you want people to shop on your website, easily find what they need. And the best indicator of them getting value is them completing a purchase because they were able to find what they need and decide to make the purchase. However, the nuance is that even if you are in an e-commerce segment, for example, it might not always mean that your North Star should be the number of purchases completed by all your users. Depending on your unique product strategy, companies in the same vertical might end up defining different product North Stars that really reflect their priorities and strategy at the time. And let's take 2 well-known companies, eBay and Amazon as examples. If you've shopped on Amazon, you would notice that Prime is a really significant part of their strategy. And if let's put ourselves in the shoes of Jeff Bezos, probably he wants every user shopping on Amazon to be a Prime subscriber. So for Amazon, let's assume that their product strategy is really to continuously grow the Prime business and turn every single user into a Prime subscriber, they might want to define a product North Star that reflects that priority. So they might want to think about, for example, prioritizing average number of purchases per Prime subscriber as their North Star metric to really make it clear what's the most important thing for their business, and to also help product teams and the rest of the company easily make prioritization and trade-off decisions. So just to recap, even if you fall under a vertical that might immediately associate with certain metrics, it is also important to reflect on what's most important for your business and what type of metrics you should be defining to make it crystal clear to the internal company how they should prioritize. So that's the game of transaction. And the third game is the game of productivity. And companies here typically want to help users perform certain tasks and become more efficient at performing those tasks. And example companies here include Slack, HubSpot, Salesforce, etc. And let's look at some example product North Stars. Companies could be measuring, for example, total number of records created, percentages of emails engaged, number of messages sent, number of active users who logged or completed a task, etc. And companies that fall into this game typically have a business model of selling, for example, licenses or seats on a subscription basis, whether it's monthly, annually, etc. And one tempting thing to do is simply measuring, for example, how many licenses have we sold or how many of seats have users purchased. However, the pitfall of that approach is while it directly correlates with revenue and it is a leading indicator of how much revenue you will generate as a business, these metrics really don't tell you if users are actively using or getting value from your product. And let's take a company like Salesforce as an example. They make money by selling licenses into companies. However, if they were to set their product North Star metric as the number of licenses sold, their product team would not have any visibility into if people are actively using their product and getting value. And when we actually look at how do users in Salesforce get value, it's around using it as a customer relationship management platform. So you would create customer records and you would actively manage those records to really drive a value for your use case. So for them, they might want to measure their product North Star as total number of records created, which is directly correlated with customers getting value, but also long-term, it should also correlate with business growth as well. So a quick note here is sometimes it might be tempting to measure product North Star metrics that are most directly correlated with revenue, but it's also really important to really hone in on a metric that accurately reflects whether the end users are getting value in these products as well. So that was a lot that we just walked through. So we talked through the 3 games of product and what are some examples that you might see with how companies measure North Stars. So the question is, what is a North Star metric? And what are some key indicators that this is a good North Star metric for your company? So let's first define what North Star metric is. The North Star metric is a leading indicator of sustainable growth for your product and company. It should act as a connective tissue between the product and the business outcomes. And these on the right are some good traits that we typically find with a solid North Star metric that moves the business and also customer value forward. The first one is it should reflect customer and business value. And a good North Star metric needs to have both, not just one. And second, when your internal employees look at this metric, they should immediately understand what is your product vision and strategy. So it should reflect your vision and strategy and what you prioritize as a company. Third, it should be a leading indicator, not a lagging indicator. And typically we think of revenue as a lagging indicator, whereas more often than not, product teams need to have more leading indicators that go before revenue recognition to understand if product initiatives are working or not. And it shouldn't be a vanity metric. Oftentimes, the issue with DAU, when companies don't actually take the time to define what activity means, and if simply measuring if people are logging into the product, is that it could be a vanity metric because activity could be triggered by a wide range of things that's totally outside of people getting value. And then it should be an actionable metric. It should be measurable. You should be able to break down the different levers of that metric to even structure teams around so that you can actually make a significant and meaningful movement in those metrics. And then last but not least, some metrics could be very difficult to understand, but it's really important for the product North Star for a company to be easily understood by the rest of the organization, not just your tech org or product team. Because oftentimes it takes a village, it takes more than the product development org, but also the rest of the company across go-to-market to move those metrics forward. So here are some traits that typically are associated with a good North Star metric as you make your internal assessment to evaluate yours. But if we were to condense all of that into just 3 key components of the North Star, and if you were to take away anything from this event, we actually want to summarize it into just 3 main things. First of all, the North Star should measure customer value. Second, it should align with your product vision. And third thing, it should be a leading indicator of revenue. So it should correlate with your business growth. And these are the 3 key components and 3 questions I would encourage all of you to ask when you are setting a new North Star metric or evaluating your current one. And after going through this definition and how you would evaluate it, let's actually use a concrete example that we have internally seen at Amplitude to also share our learnings and experience of setting our own North Star metric. 3 years ago, when we were embarking on this exercise of redefining our North Star metric, we asked ourselves the exact 3 questions that we just talked about. First of all, how do our customers get value? We answered that customers get value by asking questions in Amplitude and sharing learnings with their colleagues in an organization to drive decision-making and therefore build better products. Second question, what's our product strategy? Our answer was our unique strategy is to enable data democracy in companies. Because typically in a lot of product teams, PMs and other members of the product team heavily rely on the insights from data analysts. But with our tool, we're now enabling every user, technical or not, to be able to easily derive insights on user behavior and drive better product outcomes. So that's our product strategy. The third question is it a leading indicator of growth? And the answer is yes. As every end user in Amplitude increases adoption in our product, those businesses exchange greater value with Amplitude. And we do see that correlate with long-term revenue growth. So the one metric that we ended up defining as our North Star is called weekly learning users. It is defined as users whose insights are shared with 2 other people in the organization. And it captures whether customers are getting valued when they decide to share an insight with other colleagues in an organization. And it's also the best leading indicator that Amplitude insights are being leveraged to drive actual decision-making and product development in an organization. However, we didn't get there with first try. This was actually our second attempt in defining our North Star metric. If we actually go a few years further back into Amplitude's history, back then when we asked ourselves these 3 exact questions, we came up with different answers. When we asked, how do our customers get value? At one point in time, we said, customers get value by getting fast responses to queries. Because we think of ourselves as an analytics product, and we thought every single user needs to come in and query. Back then, when we asked, what's our product strategy? We answered, our unique strategy is to enable analyst efficiency in companies because they're the power users that are already actively querying in most organizations. And that was the customer segment that we were honing in on as part of our strategy. And as analysts answer more questions, we thought that businesses exchange greater value with Amplitude. And because those were the answers to the 3 questions back then, the North Star metric that we came up with a while ago was number of weekly queries. It is very much focused on the analyst persona, whether they're actively querying, and we thought that would move the business and the customer value forward. And in the next couple of years, as we gain deeper understanding of our customers and look at who are the most successful accounts that are on our platform right now, we actually find that the most successful companies that have been doing really well are those who involve many different types of personas within the product team, actively collaborating with each other in Amplitude, looking at insights together, and drive better product outcomes and development. So in a lot of times, our champions are not just analysts, but also PMs, engineers, designers, who all leverage our product to understand user behavior and drive decision-making. And after also doing more quantitative analysis, we decided to redefine our North Star metric with those new insights and refine our product strategy, which led us to shift from this old North Star, number of weekly queries, into the current one, weekly learning users. So hopefully sharing this internal example of how Amplitude thinks about our own North Star metric goes to show that sometimes you don't get it right the first time, and that's totally fine. And we actually anticipate that as companies go through different stages of maturity, as you learn more about your customers and do more in-depth analysis, you might actually need to evolve your North Star metric over time. So now that we've talked about the North Star definition, and I've shared our internal example of how Amplitude thinks about our own North Star, let's actually put all of this into practice. And Carmen, will hand off to you.
Thanks, Andrea. So we're going to run through an exercise now that takes an example business and breaks down what it could be. And there will be a poll for you to participate here shortly. So again, when we think about how we want to align our North Star metric, we're not necessarily trying to replace OKRs or be in competition with an OKR. We do want to be complementary. And so in the example, we're starting with, what does the CEO of a streaming music service care about? And more than likely, that answer is going to be revenue. Like any good CEO or executive, that is a top focus for the business. However, as Andrea already shared with you, revenue can be a lagging indicator. So it tells us what's already happened and not how we're tracking currently in the moment towards our goals. So we can then, though, ask the question, how does revenue translate into North Star for a product? Basically, how does this music streaming service Amplitude drive revenue? Well, they drive it through users, and they have two types of users. One of them is a premium subscriber who pays for their service, and the other is a ad-supported user, or somebody who gets to use the product for free and doesn't actually have to pay because the ads are what's covering the cost. So when we break that down and actually think, okay, so when we go a step further, what does that actually look like? Where is the revenue coming from then between these two user groups? We find in this example that actually 90% of the revenue is coming from our premium subscribers. And even though ad-supported users make up the bulk of the users for our Amplitude music streaming service, they only represent 10% of the actual revenue. So we have to think about then, what is the difference between these two? Even though we have a lot of ad-supported users, we know our revenue is coming from premium. So from a product perspective, we want to dig in and understand what is the difference in behavior between these two groups and understand where the value might lie for each of them. So we understand now how to tap into that customer value. So when we go a level deeper and actually try to understand the differences between these two users, we see that premium subscribers on average listen to music for about 75 hours a month on Amplitude, whereas the ad-supported users or free users are only spending about 25 hours a month listening. So this gives us a sense that there is a possibility that we can increase the value we present if we can get those users to potentially listen more, which is leading us to our poll question. And I kind of already given the answer away to make it easy on you, but we're going to go ahead and start polling. What is going to be a strong North Star for Amplitudes? Is it A, number of active subscribers, B, trial conversion rate, or C, time spent listening to music? So go ahead and take a couple seconds and respond to the poll. All right, I am about to close the poll. We have a number of results already in, so go ahead and answer if you haven't yet. All right, so I went ahead and closed it. Most of you got the answer correct. The North Star that we see as being the best for Amplitudes is time spent by subscribers listening to music. And so we're going to take a second here to break down why that actually is. So, first and foremost, again, is this metric tied? Is it measuring customer value in some capacity? And again, we can assume that that is going to be the case. If our customers are spending a lot of time listening to music, they're probably finding substantial value in utilizing amplitudes and will continue to drive adoption over time. Two, does it align with product vision? Again, as product leaders, you're thinking about ways you can drive user adoption and ways that you can measure that. So if someone's spending a lot of time consuming music or listening to content on the streaming service, we can assume that there will be a threshold that they eventually hit where they will move naturally from an ad supported user to a premium subscriber. So let's say that after 55 hours of listening to music in a month, that user is likely to move from free to paid. And that's the case, that's a threshold that we can measure and kind of have lined the product team around. So it does align with product vision. And last but not least, is it a leading indicator of revenue? And as we know, premium subscribers make up 90% of the revenue that's brought in for Amplitude. So if in fact we can increase the number of premium subscribers that we have, we will in fact also increase our revenue. Now, let's dig into how we can go one step further with the North Star. So, once you've established the North Star, you're actually going to want to go in and start figuring out what are the additional indicators that are going to impact and have a positive influence on this North Star. And so, we've developed a formula here that we call the product analytics formula. And the first one that we start on is breadth. So, this is where we're going to focus on how many active or returning users are performing a value of action within our product. The second one is going to be around depth. So, what is the depth of their engagement? We're going to think about the extent that they're performing or engaging within the platform or service that you are providing. Next step of the equation is frequency. So this should seem fairly obvious, but how often are the users engaging with your service or product and performing that action of value that you're trying to drive with them? And last is efficiency. So how fast do they exceed? This fourth piece of this equation may or may not actually be one that you include for your particular North Star formula. This is going to depend on whether your efficiency is a key to driving that customer value and driving revenue. So if you're a service like Postmates or DoorDash, this may be something you include in your formula. But for the example of amplitudes, that doesn't quite fit in. So we're going to break down how we arrive at time spent by subscribers listening to music. And for amplitude, the three aspects of this equation that we are going to focus on are going to be breadth, depth, and frequency. So what does that specifically look like for amplitudes? For breadth, we are going to define that as listeners. So the number of trial users or the number of premium subscribers can be a metric that we use to help track how we are measuring to our North Star. For depth, we're going to focus on content engagement. So what are the number of hours per session that they're having? As a product team, you can think about what you can do to drive up hours per session. Are you recommending additional playlists? Are you personalizing their experience some way? And as a marketer, you're also thinking about how could I drive engagement here? Then the third aspect of this functional equation for measuring the North Star for amplitudes is going to be listening frequency. So what are the number of sessions per week? And how are you driving and increasing those number of sessions per week? Are you sending a notification when Taylor Swift drops a new album? Is marketing helping get that announcement out there? Where are users being able to see things that are going to make them come back to your platform more frequently? So this is just an example of how you can think about developing your own North Star. There's obviously a lot of room to practice here. As Andrea mentioned, it is going to be the leading indicator of sustainable growth for your team. is going to be something that you are going to want to adopt and make sure is aligned with other business objectives and revenue. But it can also be broken down so you and your team can be measured on a daily or weekly basis to make sure that you are trending in the right direction towards achieving your product North Star. And as Andrea also mentioned, we did write a playbook about this and it is available. So I highly encourage you to go download the playbook and begin working through the worksheets with you or your team. And there's always the opportunity to come to Amplitude and do a workshop with your team if you need to. So now that wraps up the presentation part, we can go ahead and switch into Q&A. We'd love to know what questions you have for either Andrea or I.
Hi guys, thank you very much. That was a great session. Yeah, any questions, pop them in the chat and we will fire away. Just give everyone a minute to get their thoughts together. Oh, we've got one question here from Raul who asks, for a large organization operating in multiple geographies where each region might have different priorities, is it advisable to have local North Stars to follow?
I could take a stab at this and then Carmen, feel free to jump in. So I think we think of North Stars around products, less so about how multinational the company is. I think it's really important to have a product level North Star because your product is probably quite similar, even if you operate in multiple geographies. And for that product, think about what are the critical actions that are most associated with customers getting value, and what are the metrics that are correlated with long-term revenue growth. And my assumption is that that should probably be the same regardless of geography. And then once you define the product level North Star metric on a given quarter or any given time frame, it is fine for different regions to have different priorities. And that becomes like an OKR process. But everything that each region is working on should ladder up to moving that product level North Star. So that's my take.
Andrea, where, as she mentioned, your OKRs might be slightly different, but also when you think about your go-to-market activities, that's where things might be different depending on what your regional goals are. But the more consistent you can keep that North Star about your product, I think the better it will serve your organization.
Great, thanks both. We've got another question here from Vineet who asks, how frequently should we look at the North Star metrics?
So my personal take is that every day, but I think depending on what level you are operating at, for example, imagine you are the VP of product and you are the owner of the North Star metric for the entire company. You probably want to make sure that you're understanding how it's trending at least on a monthly basis and expecting different product teams to be moving the ladder up to the North Star on a weekly basis. So it really depends on at which altitude you're looking at. If you're the product team, you should probably look at it every single day because you're moving a very specific lever and you're actively shipping initiatives that you want to analyze more frequently.
I agree. The formula that I just walked you through, the components that make up the function of the North Star, those are going to be the ones that you're really paying attention to on that daily or weekly basis because those are the indicators of your leading indicator.
Nice, thank you. We've got another question here from Mike who says, do you see OKRs aligning with scaling frameworks like SAFE, for example?
The SAFE, I cannot speak to having a lot of knowledge on that specifically. But I think the idea overall is that you do want to make sure that your North Star is not in competition with any OKR. And if you do so in a thoughtful manner, you can make sure that happens. And again, the big difference between OKRs and the North Star, again, is a lot of times OKRs are measuring what has already happened and not what is actually happening in this moment in time. And so you want the North Star to be somehow associated with an OKR, but it's that leading metric. So thinking about revenue as an example, revenue is almost always going to be some aspect of a key objective your organization is working towards. And so long as the North Star is aligned with that key objective, it's likely going to be aligned with other OKRs you have as well.
Great, thanks. And I think we've got time for one more question from Jennifer, who says, who do you usually include in a defining and building your North Star metric? Just product or other departments?
I can take a stab at this. So definitely it's a very cross-functional effort. Besides PMs who I think usually have a pretty good handle on what is the product strategy and customer insights, you also need research and design, because there are also the function that owning those customer insights in an organization. You need analytics, because it's actually quite complex defining the right one. Oftentimes you need to find certain thresholds, not just the critical action itself, but for example, how many times do users complete certain actions that will correlate with long-term retention? And you need to collaborate with finance, because you want to know if these metrics actually are correlated with revenue growth. And you need to, in Amplitude's case, we need to work with sales, marketing, and customer success, because oftentimes we can increase our North Star weekly learning users, not just with product initiatives, but also with customer success managers, helping our accounts gain increased engagement and adoption. So yeah, the answer is it's really cross-functional.
I completely agree with what Andrea shared. As a marketer, specifically working on our product-led motions, if I am trying to influence a certain behavior, I want to make sure that I am in alignment with what the product team sees as the behavior to be influenced.
Nice, thank you both. We've got quite a few more questions in the chat, but unfortunately we've run out of time today. But thank you for sharing your insights and your presentation. I can definitely say our attendees enjoyed the content from all their questions in the chat there. Yeah, and thank you to our attendees for tuning in. We've got one more session left today, so stay tuned for that. And once again, thanks to Andrea and Carmen for your presentation.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Bye.